Good evening. Welcome to the September 14th, 2020 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. This meeting is being conducted entirely remote. Order Baker's March 12th order, suspending provisions of the open meeting law, and the governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitations on people that may gather in one place. Note this is being recorded and it's being sent to the internet. I think we're going to use the Q&A function if someone wants to be recognized to speak. Let's see, Justin is hearing slight feedback. That's from James. He should be muted when he's not speaking, I think.
Sorry about that.
With that, first item is public input.
Don't you have to get everybody to say we're here?
Oh, I guess we have to say who's here. Let's see. Dave?
Here.
Justin?
Here.
Linda?
Here.
Prabhu?
Here.
I'm here. I can see that Chris is here. Chris, help us. Who else is here?
Yeah, I'm present too, and then staff Natalia Allward.
Everyone can hear everyone, all right? That said, time for public input. If there's someone who has something they want to talk about that's not on the agenda otherwise, now's the time. Action item, draft decision, site plan approval SPA 2020-1 and 30 Snow Road, lot 3. We have a draft. Anything to say, Chris?
Yes, I'm just pulling up the decision now. So this is the decision as drafted. If you remember correctly, this is the lot 3. So this is the one that is pertaining to the Dover Amendment. So this is just for site plan approval, not a special permit.
It'll help if you enlarge that.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
all on my screen.
Is that better?
Much better.
So we have the exhibits. So in terms of findings, we have some of our standard findings. I do know I wasn't able to include, Justin did send me a number of edits and suggested language changes. I haven't been able to include those in this this uploaded version, but I can go over those with the board after we kind of run through this, or if they want to start there, either way. But notable, I did include language in terms of the findings. Yeah, it's in the R20. This site is not located in the Water Supply Protection Overlay District. Lot 2 does have a portion of the property in that. I did include language pertaining to the proposed use, and it is to be leased and sold specifically to the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. and I use the reference exhibits for that. The Dover language, I just cited the section in General Laws 40A, Section 3. That's from Ginny's Town Council's review. And then I included language in terms of the petition that was submitted from the residents, as well as the discussion on the sight lines that the board had, including the potential for the mirror conditions for the mirror and the site work to be completed prior to the structures being issued building permits. We do have a waiver, and that's in terms of the site plan requirements in terms of parking calculations, loading spaces, service areas, landscaping and lighting, and proposed signage. The reasoning for that is included in the applicant's submission of the waiver request form. There's also the request for waivers from the earthwork calculations and traffic study. And then finally, we included conditions. So we have the standard conditions, and then conditions to be met prior to the start of construction, requiring a pre-construction meeting, construction control and stabilization measures. So this is the condition C15 is the condition regarding the traffic mirror. And then condition C16, the way I structured that is that's in terms of the vegetation clearing and grading. The way I structured that is that the applicant would complete the work and then have the town's peer review engineer and an agent of the planning board out to inspect. And at that point, they would either recommend that additional work be completed or authorize that the work is done in accordance with the provided plan, which will then authorize the building permit. Conditions to be met during construction, those are fairly standard. And then after construction conditions, also pretty standard. So that's the decision as I drafted it. I can pull up Justin's comments if the board would like to consider those, or if there's anything they want to discuss in the meantime.
Are there substantive changes or just typos?
The language was fairly substantive. Let me pull it up.
Before you talk about them, Chris, just briefly,
Yep.
I do want to call out that in my travels today, I did notice that on this site, in actuality, they did some stuff today as far as like delivering of hay and starting some staking and erosion control kind of measures, it looks like as well. I don't know. I don't think what they did is necessarily gated on us approving this in any way, but I don't know if you had a thought there before we kind of got into that.
So, I mean, erosion control doesn't require a building permit. I think I wouldn't see that as an issue. Them getting a jump start on that. If the board voted unfavorably, they would have just done that work.
Yeah,
on their own. So
mostly just the building permit hangs on our decision And so anything that doesn't require building permit is up to whatever other rules might apply. There's earth removal, for example. Um, Oh, and also anything they do up through the end of the appeal period is at their risk.
So the comments from Justin were that finding 5 should reference Exhibit 26 explicitly. Finding 6 should reference Exhibit 7 explicitly. And then for finding 7, that's the one that I think is a little more substantial in terms of language. So I put that the applicant noted that they were amenable to a condition requiring the installation of a sightline mirror across the street and completion of the proposed sightline grading and clearing prior to the issuance of a building permit for structures on the property. And his language was to add subject to the satisfactory compliance with the plans by the board or its designee or something similar to that, such that they could have someone to inspect the sight lines to both be accurate and unobstructed.
And I noted that that is sort of covered in the conditions anyway, but it's still related to the findings in my mind from what we discussed in the open session.
Mhm. So that's all I had.
I had a question on the waivers.
Mhm.
So I was looking at the zoning bylaws, so if you go to waiver number 1, what is the waiver against? Is it, what does the waiver number 1 mean? Does it mean that the paper copies of the plans and stuff are not being presented in lieu of everything being digital, or what exactly is the waiver?
So the waiver, the first waiver is section 1.333D, which is our site plan requirements. So the specific waivers called out were in terms of parking calculations. So typically plans are required to show with our parking schedule the number of required parking spaces and what the provided parking spaces are. In this case, the applicant's reasoning was that's typically more geared towards commercial rather than residential type uses, and that providing parking calculations for a duplex use was something that could be waived by the board. It wasn't necessarily required for approval. 19 is similar to that, providing clear parking and loading spaces. They're not gonna, because it's a residential use, they're not gonna be creating actual parking stalls. Service areas and all facilities for screening. Again, they cited that that's more geared towards commercial properties as a requirement. And then landscaping and lighting and proposed signage. So those are things that typically are aspects that are required to be included on the plans, but in this case, they're asking for a waiver due to the residential nature of the proposal.
So what could be an implication in terms of parking calculations? If we say that, yes, this is waived off, without a basis for parking calculation, so can the users eventually park 50 cars there? Is that a viable situation?
I mean, I don't think that would realistically happen. So, I mean, similar to a residential property, if you had a large event and parked a number of cars, you would be limited to what you can fit in your specific driveway. And if it was parking on the street, then it becomes a police matter. It's similar to a residential use. So parking calculations, they do, we can go to the plans, but they do, I mean, I think it's reasonable because of the residential nature of the use. They're showing, I believe there's garage spaces as well, but there's,
So it's not that they're not bound by any rule. They are bound by the rules applicable.
they're just asking not to do
residential.
the specific calculation and show it on the plans, which I believe is, I don't recall off the top of my head, but it should be fairly minimal.
If I could just jump in there, Chris, I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
supposed to speak here, but I just wanted to note that at one point in his review, Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering actually asked us to show on both of these lots more driveway space to make it easier for cars to park and to turn around. He asked us to enlarge both of the driveways, and we did so.
And if I can ask on the second one, or the third one, the traffic study. I remember we talked about this. So what was the reason for requesting waiver for a traffic study?
I'll pull up it's in Exhibit 1.
I don't see a reason cited there if I'm looking at the right spot. Next page.
Yeah, so they didn't cite a specific reason for the traffic study, but I would presume that it's similar, that this is a residential use that is not going to generate significant amounts of traffic. And therefore the actual study of traffic along the road and impacts, typically they do an in-depth kind of count of traffic going both ways and how much time that the added traffic would add to that travel.
I'm sure we need a traffic, we call for a traffic study, special permit. This is site plan. We call for traffic study for something of this sort. I don't remember that we do.
So because it is a site plan approval, they are required to provide a traffic study unless waived by the board.
Okay. I was thinking there was some lower limit of when we. Okay.
Sorry, you're right. I mean, I guess in this case, the traffic study waiver, though requested, probably isn't needed because it does say specifically applications for, well, that's in terms of subdivision, but greater than 20 units.
Mm-hmm.
Or special permit or special permit with site plan review. In this case, it's a straight site plan approval, so it doesn't have the special permit, but I think this is a little bit of a unique case given the Dover considerations in terms of that specific language.
Okay. Do we have anything else? Questions, corrections? You've got all of yours, Justin?
Yeah, Chris mentioned all of mine. One thing I was asking was, do we have any direct reference to like what the waivers were that we were the reasons for the waiver requests that we have in Exhibit 1 is probably the only spot that he remembered seeing them. And then kind of a open question for the board, kind of for help me from a past history for us, is there typically a limit on amount of earthwork movement that we would grant these for? The reason that the applicant cited for the waiver was for because less than 1,000 cubic yards for the cutting and filling.
So I'm not specifically aware if there's been past thresholds in terms of earthwork. If that's something the board wants to consider, I'm happy to try and look at some past projects, but
I'll say for myself, seeing the amount of earthwork that was brought to the site since the clearing was initially done and the elevations that exist now and what's on the plans, I'm less eager to say, yes, I'm willing to waive that in particular. But if there was a precedent that this board has set, that would have been, I wish I thought of it before tonight, but it would have been useful for me to have recognized, because I don't want to, the last thing I want to do is make an arbitrary decision, so to speak, but it doesn't feel like a thing that should be waived in this case to me.
I'm not sure what we would control earth removal under. The town has earth removal bylaws. But it's not come into play here. I think that for this sort of thing, there's some accommodation anyway, even in that rule.
Yeah, I note that the specific waiver is for calculation, not necessarily a determination that the removal or not in and of itself is bad. It's just for the calculation. But it's hard from my mind to wrap around that 1,000 cubic yards is accurate based on what I've seen, but it doesn't mean that it's not accurate. It just means it's hard for me to say, yes, we can waive that, but I don't know if it really will matter in practice. That's the downside for that one for me.
If this weren't part of a site plan permit and they were just moving dirt in or out of their lot until they got to the earth removal bylaw threshold, which is a lot higher, I think, no one would have anything to say at all, would they?
if it doesn't meet the thresholds for the earth removal bylaw, there wouldn't be any way to regulate, from my understanding.
Chris, actually, there's the stormwater permit, the alteration of square footage. And we did get a stormwater permit issued by the Conservation Commission for the proposed work.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, do we have anything else?
I have nothing else.
Anybody else? Okay. Do we have a motion? Do we feel we can go ahead with a motion that includes that what we discussed tonight will be included in the final decision?
Well, everybody's stepping up forward on this one.
Yeah, don't all jump in at once, please.
Um,
Oh, I see Vikram is here. Hi.
I don't think we have. I mean, because it's Dover, so.
Well, but if there's some site plan approval requirement, that hasn't been met. And they're asking for it to be waived, but I'm not sure that there's even a requirement to waive. Apparently there is, but I don't remember.
If I may jump into a question, probably for Chris, is if we waive the requirement about signs in particular, does that mean that if they wanted to throw signs up that say, for just throw a name out there that might not be accurate, but Brain Injury Association of America right on the road, does that give them that right to just do that? Or is that saying basically still no that?
So no, so there's been no signage proposed on the plans. In terms of that waiver, that would just be waiving the requirement to show signage on the plans.
Okay.
I did leave language regulating the installation of signage that's standard for commercial properties in there, just in case, for that exact reason, if they wanted to put some kind of a display of this facility, whether or not they propose that, as it is more of a residential use, that's up to them, but it would still be regulated.
Okay,
Yeah, our approvals of this generally, point out that the applicant is still, regardless of this, what we say in this approval, the applicant is obligated to comply with the town sign bylaw, which means all signs should be erected, in accordance with the bylaw. If a sign requires a special permit from this board because the sign can't fully comply with the sign bylaw, that comes back to us as a special permit. Although in this case, it would be interesting to, and we probably will never face it, but how does the Dover Amendment apply to a sign rather than a building? But I don't think we need to go there. The short answer is that the waiver simply is, we're not insisting that you show on the plan any proposed signs.
I think that I seem to recall language usually starts off with this decision or this approval does not say anything about signs one way or another. That nothing's being approved here, and then it's subject to.
I'm just going to pull up the actual conditions, and we can just.
Right, C5 here.
So
Yeah, that's
signage
standard
denoting
language in most of our decisions.
Yep, so signage denoting entrance and exit shall be installed in conformance with this decision and Exhibit 15 and 19B prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit for the building from the building department. Signage for and associated with the use authorized by this decision shall be installed in accordance with and conform to the Town of Grafton zoning bylaw. This decision shall not be construed as approving or authorizing any such signage.
Right, that last sentence is essentially.
That's the key there that says here we're not approving or authorizing any signage.
Okay, we're getting down to hearing time. I'd like to see if we can decision here. If there's nothing else.
Yep, I'll offer a motion that move that the board approve this decision as drafted, including the findings, approving the waivers requests, and approving all the conditions with modifications as discussed during this meeting.
That was Linda seconding.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabhu.
Do we vote on individual waivers or it is a blanket across all?
Well,
The motion was a blanket motion. If we want to vote on individual waivers, we can withdraw that motion and vote on or exclude the waivers from the motion and also the final approval and then vote on individual waivers if any board member wants to do that.
I would like to call out, I don't understand the protocol, but I would like to call out W3 and vote on that separately, or exclude, Dave's, to your guidance, exclude that as part of the motion.
All right, so
How about, Dave, if you amend your motion to cover everything except that item, and we'll vote on everything else, and then we can have a vote on that item.
yes, I will amend the motion to exclude waiver W3 and also exclude the overall approval, since if we vote the overall approval, then the vote on the waiver is, taking the vote on the waiver afterwards looks a little odd.
So just to
Is that agreeable
clarify
to
this,
everybody?
Yes.
I'm comfortable with that. Yes.
sorry, just to clarify, this is a motion for the waivers 1 and 2, correct?
The motion does include waivers 1 and 2. The idea is that we will vote on waiver 3 separately.
Okay.
And then we will
Thank you.
vote, I'll make another motion to approve the decision as a whole.
And the waiver.
We'll vote on the waiver. I mean, yeah, I'd say vote on the waiver, get that vote done, record that vote, and then we'll vote on the overall final approval of the decision.
If everyone's okay, we'll step back now, and is there any discussion on that? Is that too confusing? I hope not. All right. Again, Dave,
Aye.
Dustin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabu,
Aye.
I vote aye. So that motion carries. Now then, you might be able to do both in one motion, Dave. Oh, no, do it in 2
I
motions.
think you need to separate them.
Well, you don't, be better.
I'll move that the board vote to approve the requested waiver W3.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes.
So the reason I requested this to be called out is I'm not very clear how to read this for a decision. Is this to be seen as a commercial entity for the approval purpose? And then if that's the case, I'm not comfortable waiving off traffic study. But if it is residential, this should be looked at as a residential purpose. Then I don't think we have put in a traffic study as a requirement for other residential use. And if that is the situation, if I'm right, then why is this even a waiver? So this is where my confusion is.
So the proposal is that it'll be leased by a commercial entity, the Massachusetts Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired. But it is primarily a residential duplex use. So as a group home, it would be for a number of individuals specifically assigned from that association.
Yeah, I think, the ownership may be a commercial entity, but the use here is residential, essentially. It'd be like any other commercial entity owning a single family home and renting or leasing it.
And this is,
So it's the use here that's key, not the ownership.
okay, that helps. And this is, I don't recollect, what is this? Is this zone for mixed use, or commercial use, or only for residential use?
Zone for residential.
The zoning is residential.
And special, it's zoned for for R20.
So again, the use is exempt from consideration under Dover. So really, we would have to look at this just as a duplex, and if that residential 2-family in terms of expected traffic would be a matter that the board wants to consider.
Is there any other?
Sorry. So, sorry, Chris, you said this should be considered as a residential unit, residential duplex unit with the traffic associated for that residential duplex unit. That's how we need to consider for a decision.
That'd be my recommendation, correct?
Okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion? This is on the motion for the one waiver. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabu,
Aye.
and I vote aye. That motion carries.
All right, we'll move that the board approve the decision based on all the, well, approve the decision. We've already voted to approve all the language.
Second.
Somebody second. It's a
Justin
race.
seconded, I think.
I know
It's
Linda
okay.
did.
Okay,
It's okay.
anybody can take it.
Yeah. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Dave,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prabu,
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. It is done. There are some questions in Q&A, Chris. I don't think. Well,
So the public hearing has been closed on that specific item. I think we can probably touch on those in terms of lot 2, but
yeah.
I mean, in terms of, I think there is, let me just look real quick. I think there was one, I can speak to the one on site plan approval versus special permit. I mean, I think we've touched on that numerous times throughout this, but I can reiterate again if the board wants.
It would explain again to everybody what the difference is.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you, is that something the board wants me to address?
Quickly.
So, under the Dover, the process is looking at just site plan approval. There's specific criteria in the zoning bylaw that the board can consider under site plan approval. Special permit and site plan approval, which does apply for lot 2, which we'll hear later in the night. The site plan or the special permit criteria are separate. Those are also outlined in the zoning bylaw. And so the board will be able to consider all of those criteria for lot 2 because it is both special permit and site plan approval.
Yeah. Okay. And part of the question stream over here. I'm trying to run the Zoom meeting consistent with the way we run in-person meetings. At in-person meetings, people can't just throw out questions in the middle of what we're doing.
Mhm.
And I think our Board of Selectmen discovered that. They found themselves spending hours fielding stuff being thrown at them constantly during the meeting.
So
I'm going to try to follow this as much as we can the same way. So it's consistent with the way an in-person meeting would work. Yeah, I'll go ahead.
my recommendation in terms of that is that similar to the process of an in-person meeting, it is until recognized by the board, the comments would not be considered by the board. So the person doesn't need to be authorized to speak. I think it does flow well to allow people to add the comments, but especially in this case, because the public hearing has been closed, the board isn't really authorized to recognize comments other than maybe procedural matters. So similar to that, I think it's just on, and I monitor those comments to try and when it comes to the public comment portion, allow the board to recognize as needed. But
Okay, well, the little red 3 on my screen goes away. Maybe we can mark the answered.
Yeah, I do know that the select board did do away with the Q&A button on their meeting like a week or two ago.
Yeah, but the thing I saw, and I don't know whether they did it, but they were talking about using raised hand,
Yes.
which is consistent with an in-person meeting. What I'm not sure of, and Chris and I have talked a little bit, but unfortunately, I don't have enough experience really running Zoom meetings and webinars to really know where the options are. I don't see raised hand offered to us, and I did see that the notice said webinar, and I think that's somewhat different mechanism, a meeting where everybody is present. So anyway, trying to do it. That's the goal. Okay. Okay. Okay, we'll skip down since it's time for our public hearings. This is, we'll start with, should we do these together or individually, Chris? Or Joe, Justin?
I
So
was
this
gonna
is
say, go ahead.
this is a new. We haven't heard this one yet. So these are new hearings.
But they're, well, okay,
They can be handled together, though. I mean, unless
I-
the applicant feels otherwise.
probably need the notices for both.
Yeah, the notice is actually the same for both. It's the exact same notice. So and given the request is also essentially the same, and it's I was going to recommend together, but the applicant can certainly disagree. But
Can we notice? Actually, the notice doesn't have the address being 43 and 44 or whatever, but so go ahead.
okay. The Grafton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 14th, 2020, commencing at 7:30 p.m. to consider two applications as follows. Application for modification of a special permit and site plan approval for a second one-year extension of an approval with conditions granted on August 27th, 2018 on property located at 43 Estabrook Avenue, as shown on Grafton Assessors Map 49, Lot 1, and application for modification of a special permit and site plan approval for a second one-year extension of an approval with conditions granted on August 27th, 2018 on property located at 44 Estabrook Avenue, as shown as Grafton Assessors Map 49, Lot 6. Both properties are located in a low-density residential R40 zoning district. The applicant for 43 Estabrook is Estabrook Valley LLC, and the applicant for 44 Estabrook is BWC Lake Ripple LLC. The owner for both properties is Patricia Knowlton, trustee, Knowlton Farms Nominee Trust. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning-board for more information.
Okay. Chris?
Yep. So you may recall this 43 and 44 Estabrook was before you at the last meeting in terms of a modification to include some of a change in the mixture. It's the solar field. This application is for extension of the previous decisions for 1 year, mainly to allow them to get through the building permit process, which they are currently going through, but per the decision, that timeline is coming close. And so this would just allow that to procedurally move forward.
Okay. Do we have anything that pretty well covers it, but does our applicant want to have anything to say?
Hi, everybody. Drew Pearson, representing the applicant with Blue Wave Solar. Yeah, just very appreciative of the opportunity to put this extension in front of the board, and just want to thank you in advance for your consideration. We've been preparing everything effectively to begin construction, and upon receiving the building permit, which I understand is to be potentially days away, we are ready to begin construction. We have our contractor lined up. The landowner is, really looking forward to, working with us and our partners on the farming end to, begin their agricultural operation. In any event, we are, ready to break ground on this project. So, thank you for your time.
I recall when the first solar was put in over there, that the power company did a fair amount of work putting in lines, I guess, to carry the output. Are they going to be doing more work, or are they adequate for what you're adding to the supply?
Yeah, they will be doing work on certain parts of the feeder between our site and I think it's the mile or so stretch between the properties and the substation. So we will be contributing to upgrades along the distribution line.
Okay. Any discussion from the board?
And one question. So 43 is the one north. That is a solar panel thing. What a solar farm? What's the one on 44?
Also a solar farm. The 43 one is a 2-acre array. The one on 44 is a 12 acre or 11 and a half acre array. 43 will host ground crops, vegetables, pumpkins, strawberries, and then 44 will host rotational grazing of cows.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Am I missing anything from the public? If not, I need some motions.
I move that we close both public hearings for 43 and 44 Estabrook. And
Second.
direct staff to draft decisions appropriate.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. David,
Aye.
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Prebu,
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Both
Thank you.
will probably do a decision at our next meeting. Right? Okay. Moving on. This is major residential special permit MRSP 2020-08/PP and preliminary plan approval at 61 Maple Ave. Notice?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. The planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 14th, 2020, commencing at 7:30 p.m. to consider the application for a major residential special permit and preliminary plan approval for a 37-lot residential development on property located at 61 Maple Avenue, as shown on Grafton Assessors Map 129, Lot 17. Said property is located in the medium-density residential, R20 and Industrial I zoning districts. The applicant is Stephen David, trustee, 61 Maple Avenue Realty Trust, and the owner is, I'm going to butcher this, but Chung Hee Chun Pak to Hayong. Copies of the application and plan are available for public inspection on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March stay-at-home advisory, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation. Please see www.grafton-ma.gov/planning-board for more information. And apologies to the person I just butchered their name.
At least you tried. I can't handle it. Okay.
Yep, so actually, I don't know if the applicant is on. I'm not seeing him in either the panelists or attendees. But this is an application for a major residential special permit and a preliminary subdivision plan. So there would still need to be the definitive subdivision plan approval process if the board found this amenable. I'm going to bring up the plans for the flexible subdivision. So this is a 37 lot residential subdivision. There is fairly extensive wetlands to be considered on this property. They are proposing a number of wetland crossings, so this will also trigger conservation approval. I do note, which I imagine the board will want to have some discussion on, I believe that's happened in the past, is this is proposing a loop road, or what's sometimes called a lollipop subdivision. The board will have to consider this in terms of the 500-foot dead end requirements. So this portion of the road here, which is the could be considered a dead end road, is just under the 400 feet. The road loops around, and so whether or not the board considers that satisfying the dead end requirements, I believe that's been in a discussion in the past.
We do have prior examples of the board voting that it does not satisfy.
This is a topic that we will very definitely want to discuss in connection with this.
Yeah, and I mean every application stands on its own for certain, but I just wanted to call that attention as something the board will want to consider. I think we're still awaiting Graves review of this application, so certainly more to come. But
the notice mentioned the I district as being part of this. Do we know which part of it is the I?
Yes, if you take the you take the entire length of this property that abuts the railroad tracks, go back 500 feet from the railroad tracks towards Maple Ave. That entire part of it. That's the industrial part of it. But for all practical purposes, the entire lot is effectively R20, because I looked this up just the other day. When the frontage, a lot with split zoning, if the more restrictive zone has the frontage, the more restrictive zone, which in this case is R20, can extend to cover the entire lot. So for all practical purposes, this entire lot can be treated as R20. The industrial zone, in fact, extends a little bit beyond this lot to a couple of other lots. The entire industrial zone has no frontage whatsoever.
Yeah.
Which calls into question, well, why did we make that industrial zone in the first place? But that's neither here nor there for this project.
Well, I remember a lot about that. We've been carving out portions from what was the industrial district there over the years, as we have in a couple of other places.
Yep.
I don't understand how you have a residential use in an I zone. I heard what you said, Dave. I need more input on that.
Refer to section 3.1.4 of the zoning bylaw for the specific language.
Well, what you were talking about frontage, that's use. That's not talking about use.
Yes, so this lot, the R20 zone, has the frontage on Maple Ave, right? And for a lot with split zoning, if the more restrictive zone has the frontage, which in this case is the R20 zone, is more restrictive, then the less restrictive part of the lot, the less restrictive zone, basically takes on the capabilities of the more restrictive zone. I have to look up the exact language to read it. See if I can call that out here real quick. divided lots, where the boundary of a district divides a lot having frontage on a street in a more restricted district, the provisions of this bylaw covering the more restricted portion of the lot shall extend to the entire lot, except as specified in section 7.3, which has to do with the water supply protection overlay. So that pretty explicitly says that for this particular lot, the entire lot is effectively R20.
I don't see that. Yeah, Chris?
It's the second sentence in this paragraph.
Did you mention the part about not extending more than 25 feet?
That's a different,
Divided lots, 314 is what I have on my screen.
right. The first sentence does not apply here because the frontage is in the more restricted district.
I don't know how you decide which is more restricted and which is,
Look at the last sentence of the paragraph.
okay, yeah, okay.
Does that still apply when we're subdividing a lot as well? For example, where the ones that are closest to Maple Ave itself would still be R20, and then the area in the back that is currently industrial would those in like subdivision pieces of property stay industrial?
That's an interesting question, but the lot as it stands now is not subdivided.
Correct. No, that's basically what we're hearing here is of doing this as a development plan that we're dividing this up.
Once, no, go ahead. Once it's divided, you won't be able to build on the lots because they're in the industrial zone. And what we're doing is arranging for them to subdivide it. I think we're going to have to get a little input on this.
Yes, it does raise an interesting question. If once this lot is subdivided, some of the individual lots may find themselves fully in the industrial zone.
Oh, if it comes in 500 feet from the railroad, about, I don't know, half of the lots. The other thing, everybody knows how I feel about the lollipop.
Yes, if we want to spend a little bit more time, I did a couple of rough measurements on this. So first of all, for clarity, we have consistently interpreted the definition of dead-end street to include not just a single street, but an entire system of streets with only one connection. So the entire lollipop is considered by our definition a dead-end street. Now the portion from Maple Ave up to the intersection of the loop is approximately 350 feet. The entire, measuring all the way around the loop and back to the intersection is around, on the conventional plan, 4,400 feet. On the flex, it's about 4,200 feet. And what we have done, again, and fairly consistently looking at loop roads, we've to determine the length of the dead end, we measure from the point of intersection of the public way to the farthest point on the loop, which in this case, the farthest point would be essentially halfway around the loop, making the farthest point or the total length of the dead end a little over 2,000 feet.
I got the
That's
same.
consistent with how we've interpreted this in the past. We're looking at a 2,000-foot dead end here.
And it's worth noting that roughly a year ago, we denied a special permit for less lots than this due to a shorter dead end extreme.
Yes, we have consistently been willing to waive the 500 feet up to 6, maybe, I think the longest one we've done is around 600. We've had several projects, some of it before most of you guys were on the board, where we had something like a 3,000-foot loop, kind of similar to this, that we just, no way. So this loop would require a waiver well beyond anything that this board has ever seriously considered granting in the past.
That's right. And you got exactly the same number I did, Dave, about 2,000 feet, the way that's the most sensible way I know to do it. And in any case, it's consistent. It's at least consistent with what we've been doing for my 30 years on the board.
Yeah.
And,
We may someday consider changing some aspect of that rule, but that day is definitely not today.
yeah, this is under the current, having been already submitted, I believe it would be under the current rules.
Yes, this has to work under the current rules.
Next week, which we're not doing because never mind.
And as long as we're discussing the dead end and the loop road, I think there's another point that raises relative to the flex and the conventional plans. As I recall, our interpretation of the requirements for a conventional plan which the conventional plan gives you the basic lot count for the flex before applying any flex bonus. And the conventional plan is required to be a plan that is reasonably expected to be developable in full conformance with zoning, subdivision rules, etc. The conventional plan has a similar loop. The only real difference is the loop on the conventional is slightly longer. But since that loop could not be developed in full compliance with the subdivision rules, that sort of changes what can be considered as the conventional plan, which gives you the lot count that's a basis for the flex. Am I remembering all that right, Bob? I think so.
Something else too, consider the flex. One of the criteria I thought is there has to be some gain. There's a pretty demonstrable gain for using that. It's going to be land that's going to be available for hiking or something. I don't really see this flex doing that.
Yeah. Well, I haven't looked hard at it, and we will look hard at it if we get that far.
Sorry, so I do believe I got a message here from Cindy Taylor Hill, who may be the applicant. I can allow to talk if that's
okay.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's Norm Hill. So,
Hello.
hi.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good.
It says Cindy on my screen.
Yeah, well, I'm on Cindy's device.
Identify yourself.
So I'd like to talk to you about that regulation regarding a lollipop. What was the number of that regulation?
It's in the subdivision control.
It's in the subdivision regs, huh? Is there a section you could point me to?
I can pull it up in a second.
Yeah, it's specifically relating to the length of a dead end street, and as was mentioned, we do consider the one connecting piece as our as a starting point for a dead end, not the idea of a loop. So the fact that there's only one road coming to Maple Ave makes this whole thing a dead end.
Yeah, we're looking at section 4.1.6 in the subdivision rules.
Say that again, please.
4.1.6.
Oh, can you call that up or can you read it to me?
Pulling up now.
1.6. That one that's right at N Street.
Yeah, I'm reading 4.1.6. I don't see anything about a loop road.
Yeah, for that, we look at the definition of a dead-end street in 2.1.1.27.
All right, and thank you.
Here we go. The point is that it says, our definition says, road or system of road. We go down to that. Is that that's in the definition, not up here?
Yeah, that's up in the definition, 2.1.1.27 to be precise.
I think that's,
I'll read the definition out so Chris doesn't have to scroll.
Well,
Street dead end. A
let's
street. Go ahead, Rob.
ahead.
Yeah. I see it up there, so I'll defer.
A street extension of a street or system of streets connected to another street at one point only, just exactly as Dave said earlier. Any proposed street which intersects with a dead-end street shall be deemed to be an extension of the dead-end street.
So I don't see how that applies to us. I mean, we're not intersecting with a dead end street.
You have a street that only connects at one point, and it's a system of streets that's something like 3,000, I don't know, 3,500 feet long.
Many other subdivisions loop around.
You know, I can think of 3 subdivisions in town that are designed just like this.
When were they built?
Well, the one Forster Yaden did was probably done in 1995-ish. One at High Point.
That had to do with a court order, and no, that was
High Point was done about 2005, I think.
that was in process when I joined the board in '91. There'd been a process, and then he came back another time, but the court had made a decision. Tell me the other cases.
A High Point, I think it's High Point Estates.
That's a
40B.
isn't it?
Did you say that's
That is a comprehensive permit?
Yeah.
Follow different rules.
Yeah, doesn't have anything to do with our subdivision rules.
Yes.
Tell me
Yes.
some more.
I can't think of another one right now.
Right. We've been over this ground probably 100 times while I'm on the board.
I'm sitting here with my client who is reading this regulation with me. His name's Stephen David, and well, I just don't read it the way you're reading it.
Well, then there are rules. We decide what they mean. That's the way subdivision rules are done. Planning board decides on the rules.
What would it say in 95?
No, the planning board decides.
So I'm curious about the 95 approval. How did that court order read?
Well, you know what? I don't remember right now. No, we've been over this ground too many times.
But I mean, I remember that subdivision went to court and the judge ruled that it had to be approved.
Yeah, but why? And under what terms?
Well, because it met your zoning bylaws, it met your subdivision regulations.
I never saw that decision. In any case, we're not going to argue about it tonight.
Have you gotten your report from Graves Engineering yet?
We have not, no.
You know, we had this pre-submission meeting before we went to this expense of doing these plans. And this was not brought up at the pre-submission meeting.
Not that that's got anything to do with anything. You didn't meet with us.
Well, we met with a representative from your board. Chris was there.
Who? No, he's not from our board. He's a town planner.
Well, he's your representative.
Continue the meeting.
I understood the comment that he did tell you.
Can we request a continuance of this meeting until we hear from Graves? Because this is a very serious issue.
It certainly is. I need to see, since it's a public hearing, I need to see if there is anything else from the board members or from anyone else present who want to speak on the record to the hearing.
Well, I would like to say a few other things. We had this pre-submission meeting, of which representatives were there from many of the town's departments, including the Conservation Commission. And the Conservation Commission recommended the flexible development plan, which we like the flexible development plan because it provides a nice loop where people could walk and enjoy nature. There's a lot of wetland resource areas out there that we're avoiding. We've done this design so that we're not impacting any of the bordering vegetated wetlands. We are crossing a couple of seasonal brooks, but we're going to bridge those. So this would be a lovely subdivision. I'm really taken back by the fact that you're interpreting this language this way.
This problem has been on that land for as long as I can remember. There's been various looks at how to develop it over the years. This isn't the first time for anyone.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Stephen David. I'm the applicant. Good evening to everyone. Putting aside the dead end issue, could you just reflect for me anything else that you see that would be problematic moving forward?
But I think we need to have Graves report before we even get very far into that. I do have a question though. I looked on the town GIS and the frontage didn't make sense. It didn't show what your drawing shows. So someone's going to have to make sense of that, not necessarily tonight.
Just a comment brief there. Just a comment brief.
How about
Yeah, there was an A&R. I'm sorry.
you wait until I stop.
All right.
Okay. Norman?
Yeah.
Okay. Now.
Okay. Regarding the frontage, there was an A&R plan done about 5 years ago, which changed the frontage. And maybe the GIS didn't reflect that when you looked at it.
Yeah, well, I think I want to see, I don't remember particularly I don't remember that very clearly. Of course, that was many years ago.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to need to see that. I'm going to need to see it just to be clear. And you had a waiver request for 25-foot radiuses?
Yeah, we're going to withdraw that. We don't need that waiver anymore.
Okay. The town GIS also showed less than 50 feet at one point back along the road coming in. There's a narrow point that looked like it was less than 50 feet. I'm going to need to be sure about that too.
Yes, there was an A&R plan done a few years ago, which purchased some land from the restaurant next door and made it not only would it be more than 50 feet wide, but there would be roundings as well. So that's on record.
I'm talking about go in your proposed road 200 or 300 feet or so. The you have your two property lines, left and right property lines, angled together on the town GIS, and at the closest point they're less than 50 feet. So if that were true, you wouldn't have enough width for a 50-foot right of way.
We have put that plan on our computer, and those lines do converge, but the minimum distance between them is greater than 50 feet.
Well,
Looks like about 65 feet when I'm looking at the GIS.
at the back, I measured it today and it was less.
I don't know the exact,
There's a corner.
yeah, at the most narrow point, it exceeds 50 feet, and there would be room there for a double barrel road if you,
We've been through that many times. That's not going to work. Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to work.
And double-barreled roads run into another rule that we have about the separation of intersections.
but it would be one road, but if your concern is a safety issue, then this would provide adequate protection.
My concern is that we have a rule that sets how land gets developed in Grafton, how roads get built to subdivide land. And we're talking about what the rule says.
Well, I think you're interpreting that rule differently than I interpret it.
Well, that
I think back in 95, it was different than the way the judge interpreted it.
do you have anything else that you want to present tonight?
Well, I'd like to point out that the town water goes by the entrance to the site, and there's town sewer available about 1,000 feet down Maple Ave. And I've spoken with both the sewer department and the water department, and they both tell me that their pipe sizes, their capacities and pressures are adequate for this project, and that they would be willing to let us tie in. So this site would be serviced by town sewer and town water. The site is a little over 35 acres, and we're proposing 43 units on the flexible development. Our client prefers the flexible. It would provide the most open space and very enjoyable walking path, and it would be protective of the environment and provide nice house sites. Our client's not asking for any waivers. This plan is 100% in conformance with your zoning bylaws and your subdivision regulations. So we've got the trees, the lights, the sidewalk, the curbing, everything the way your regulations call for. So we would hope that the board would consider granting this special permit and approve this preliminary subdivision plan. So I have nothing else to say.
It doesn't comply with the subdivision rule that we just talked about.
Mr. Chairman, this is Steve David again. I would like to request that we continue this matter for 2 weeks to give me an opportunity to look at, as well as the board, to look at the Graves comments and maybe revisit some of these issues at a continued meeting. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of money to get to this point, and I'd be interested to see the town's consultants' comments relative to the same.
As would we, of course.
But because it's a public hearing, I should listen to public as well as applicants and board members and staff. Did someone want to say something just then?
No, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. If there's people in the public that want to comment, let's move forward.
The only thing I see over here right now is someone is asking who is speaking that is identified in the meeting as Cindy Taylor Hill. I believe it's a Norman Hill.
That's correct.
And you can identify what your connection is, Norm.
I'm on her tablet at my office. I'm sitting here with Stephen David.
Yeah, but you haven't explained that you're the engineer for something or other, so on and so on.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm a professional engineer with a consulting firm of land planning. And we're the representatives for this project and the designers.
Okay. Is there anybody else who needs to make comments at this time?
There was a
Chris?
there was a Mark who raised his hand, but then it looks like it went down. I don't know if they wanted to speak, but
Raise their hand. Can I see who was raising hands? I don't see.
they had it was a Mark in the attendees, but it looks like they put the hand down. So
You're right. I haven't learned to look there. But where do I, if I were a participant, where would I, oh, I know, it's on the participants window.
yes, at the bottom of their screen, they can
Right.
there should be a button to raise hand. Yeah.
As panelists, we don't get to raise our hands.
No,
We could raise hands this way.
we're much more room open than that. Okay, well, I understand the applicant to be asking for and prepared to provide a written request to continue the meeting for continue the hearing for 2 weeks.
If I may briefly, Mr. Chair, before the thing, I would just say that in reviewing Graves and in coming back to us, it would probably be good for the applicant to identify what potential might exist for a connection if he wants to pursue this plan for moving forward. I know there is one abutter that submitted material that said they would like to connect, but looking at ArcGIS, that doesn't seem to help this plan. I don't know what exists in Northbridge side because I don't have access to see their GIS data. And a little bit more north, there is looks like a shared drive for 3 lots. So that's probably not the best from my vantage, but I don't know. Either way, it'd probably benefit the applicant to look into that.
Yeah,
My feeling.
Yeah, I'd like to say that overall, I kind of like the looks of this plan, subject to a lot of detailed investigation. And as Justin just pointed out, if another roadway connection could be made from somewhere on the loop road out to a public way in either Grafton or Northbridge, that would eliminate the dead end question entirely. I would also note, relative to a question Justin raised earlier on, that once this land has been subdivided, some number of the lots will find themselves entirely contained within an industrial zone. I don't know for sure how that impacts this, whether that would render those lots unbuildable or because they're now in an industrial zone, or whether there is some other provisions of zoning laws that somehow would make them work. That's a matter to look into, because in the worst case, that causes difficulty for some of the proposed house lots. We're not going to answer that question tonight, I know that, but it's something that we need to make sure that we keep in mind as something that does, probably needs to be resolved, because it could adversely affect the plans to develop this.
Chris, again, maybe you want to talk to the zoning officer and maybe counsel on that question. That one has never come up that I can remember.
No, I don't remember. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case, if this was approved as a subdivision, I think we may want to look at a zoning amendment to then release those lots. We can change the district.
Yeah, we
And that
have
would require
been
town
known-
meeting, but
Right. We have been known in the past to change zoning to facilitate the development of a subdivision. It's absolutely not unheard of. And again, as the way the zoning has evolved here, whatever it was once upon a time, the industrial zone as it sits now is completely useless as an industrial zone because it has no access to a public way. But that again, it's at least it's a detail that we ought to make sure that we got that squared away. We know what can happen and what should happen.
It had connection to the railroad. And there was a time when it had still had prospect for connection As I say, there's been one or maybe two different zoning changes, more at the bottom of the hill near the intersection than up at the farm.
So while I wouldn't rule out the possibility that it may have made sense at one time to zone this industrial, it doesn't look like it makes sense anymore.
No, if you look at the map, I don't have it here. If you look at the map from '86, there was I think there was a properly developable industrial zone. So it got made that way as part of the total redo of the zoning bylaw in '86-ish. It's just the carving away since, which has created some issues.
Yep, exactly. So whatever the history is, the way we see it now is what we're having to deal with.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, Tracy asked the question, would this change if there were another access? And I think that's what basically you answered.
Yes.
Okay, again, I think we're considering ourselves in receipt of a request to continue the meeting, continue the hearing.
I would move that the board grant the applicant's written request to be received to continue this hearing to the next meeting, which I believe would be Monday, September 28th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Dave?
Aye.
Justin?
Aye.
Linda?
Aye.
Prabu?
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll see you next time.
Do you interpret that language that way?
To,
Okay. I think that means we move on to D, which is special permit SP 2020-04 and site plan approval at 274 Providence Road, Providence Street Village, Inc. Continuation. What's new, Chris?
I do see the applicant, Dan Hazen, is here. So we did receive the waiver requests that the board was looking for. And sorry, I'm trying to pull up. We did receive revised plan sets, but I don't see them in the materials for tonight. So I apologize for that. Sorry, let me just pull up the plans that were. And I think we did receive a comment from the police department regarding lighting. I don't know if that was included in the final plan set.
Yes, this is Dan Hazen with Gary and Haldon Engineering. We did look at the lighting plan, and there is lighting at the intersection, not directly at the intersection, but the lighting from the site. There is light that extends out to that direction. If we move anything because of the narrow entrance on the Main Street side, and what we did was we didn't want to move it any closer to the roads to avoid any spill onto the abutting properties. But the entrance, there will be light there. It just won't be directly over the entrance itself.
Do we have anything else?
Just to continue, we added arborvitaes along the southern portion next to Texera's property. And we addressed Graves' comments as in extending the erosion control barrier and also adding some spot elevations into the areas to the north and the south. Minor comments that they had just to clean up the plans.
Is there anyone who has anything more? Board, public staff, anyone on this?
My memory, such as it may be, tells me that we had a question about satisfying a setback requirement.
Yep,
And you have any follow-up on that, Chris?
that is part of the waiver requests that were submitted.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that after the last meeting, and it occurred to me that perhaps the way that this is viewed into the village mixed use bylaw would interpret the driveway here as the access street. The frontage of the buildings would be the part that faces the driveway. The parking areas would be considered perpendicular parking. The setback requirement in that case is there's a front yard requirement of 5 feet in that case. So it's looking at it a little bit differently than setbacks from the existing public ways. But generally speaking, the way the VMU is written, I think the proper interpretation would have this driveway being considered the access street with the building fronting on the driveway. And I don't know if that really, for all practical purposes, I don't know that it makes a difference. There's a request that we waive a setback requirement of some kind. Presumably we are able to do that. So then which way this is interpreted would just affect, what exactly the setback or front yard requirement is that we're waiving.
What, Chris?
Because the building does not face either Main Street or
Right.
Providence Road. Although you could argue that one end of the building is a front that faces Providence Road. Look at it that way, I guess. It's a configuration that the village mixed use bylaw doesn't really think about.
Right. I mean, I think the village mixed use is really trying to get, it really kind of considers probably more regular shaped lots in terms of putting the building frontage up towards the public right of way, and in the sense of this access road, I think it may still satisfy that intent. But it really, I guess it's up to the board in that specific interpretation.
Is that where we can waive it?
Yeah, let me just pull up the waiver request.
In general, things like setback requirements, front yard requirements, they're part of the zoning bylaw. They're not, and the question would be, under what authority do we have to waive that? Where most zoning bylaw requirements, and unless the board is explicitly authorized to waive them, they can pretty much be waived only by a variance from the ZBA. So I want to make sure that we're clear that we have the authority to do this. I don't want to overly complicate things, but we also don't want to create a handle for someone to challenge this. Whatever we decide, we'd like to have our decision be able to stand.
So the waiver request is from 12/6/1/224, which is the zoning bylaw. Yeah, so I mean, I mean, I could look into that more, but I am hesitant, as David Robbins suggested, in terms of saying that the board can waive a zoning requirement as part of this procedure.
Now, if we could say that the front yard here is from the building steps out to the curb where the parking lot is on either side of that little finger that things, if we call that finger the front yard, I think we're good.
Well,
I think if the board is comfortable with that, it should be included as a finding in terms of making that very clear in the.
are we going to settle this tonight, or do we need to find out? Do we need to go into it further?
Did we need to have a look at the revised site plan? Chris, you mentioned there was a revised site plan. The one that you brought up was September 9th. It's not online.
Right, yeah, so we did receive it by email, but I apologize, it wasn't uploaded to the meeting materials for tonight. The revisions were mainly, as Dan Hazen had described, in terms of adding some landscaping and other minor adjustments. I just pulled up in the zoning bylaw, the approval procedure 1.3.36. I just wanted to look at the language in that term. And I do note that it does say that the planning board shall determine whether, within 90 days after the date of the public hearing, the planning board shall determine whether the site plan complies with the purpose and provisions of this bylaw, which is the zoning bylaw. And so I do believe that they have the authority to render a finding if they are interpreting the frontage as David Robbins has suggested. Again, I would include that in the findings, but
That's different than a waiver. That's an interpretation. That's generally we say, we have several places in the bylaw where we explicitly called out that the board does have an ability to do certain waivers on certain items, but I don't think part of it. So you handle it as an appropriate or proper interpretation, and maybe we can move ahead. Anybody have any problem with that? All right. Anything else?
I'll say, Bob. Sorry, Pablo, but I'll just say briefly that I think that path forward sounds good to me, unless the applicant wants to get that clarification before we close the public hearing. That's how I would say that. If the applicant wants us to ask the building inspector, so they have a little bit more cover if there is any sort of challenge on this, then the zoning enforcement officer, so to speak, that I think we can certainly accommodate that, but otherwise I'm okay moving forward as we discussed.
Again, that may be a question for council more than the
council, whatever, whoever.
It sounds to me like the board is really inclined to wrap this up and say, we approve the plans, the latest plans. What we're worried about is making sure that we write our decision in a way that covers all the necessary bases. In particular, we deal with what looks like it could be interpreted as a non-compliance with a particular parameter of the zoning bylaw. So if nothing else, we're looking at, we want to come up with the right way to look at it, because there appear to be 2 or 3 different ways that we might look at this and interpret it, all within the context of the village mixed use. Recognizing that this is not a situation that the village mixed use bylaw anticipated. As a side note, I would suggest that with this and perhaps other recent experience or possible experience with the VMU bylaw, we might want to build into the VMU bylaw some additional flexibility for the board to deal with situations that don't fit very well with the way the bylaw is currently written. But that's for another time. Right now, we want to try to deal with this, get it done, make sure that the decision says what we want it to say.
But the thing is that if we close the hearing and then it turns out that it is a problem, it's a mess. You know, you have to go back and it's a hassle. As long as the applicant is okay with whatever amount of exposure.
Yeah, well, just let's keep in mind too what we've done with a number of recent decisions and applications is that if we were to close the hearing tonight, it would be 2 weeks from tonight before we could vote on a decision. If we were to leave the hearing open tonight, work on a decision, close the hearing at the next meeting, assuming that something doesn't come up to change what we have to do, we can continue the hearing for 2 weeks, open it again, or complete the hearing, close the hearing, and have a decision ready to go. So in either case, being somewhat optimistic, but allowing room for a little bit of wiggle room, a decision could be approved by the board in 2 weeks.
The applicant okay with that? Does he understand?
Have we made it confusing enough?
Clear as mud. So essentially in 2 weeks, regardless, if we continued for 2 more weeks, you could have the decision prepared so that you could vote on it, have the decision ready to go, and regardless, in 2 weeks, we would be done and done. Or, but as long as there's no issues with zoning,
right?
The hearing's not closed. So
yeah, the only thing that could delay this is if we find that there's simply no way that we can write a decision that properly approves this.
Well, let's just see what we have when we get to 2 weeks from now. Either we'll have a decision we can do, or we'll have some more hearing to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Assuming we don't run into a glitch like that, as you said, close the hearing in 2 weeks, vote on the decision right after we close the hearing.
Okay. Unless there's someone else who wants to speak,
I had one question.
All right, go ahead.
Dave, sorry. So Dave, you were referring to a parking lot. In the plan, I don't see a parking lot. So what were you referring to as a parking lot? The garage, right. Or?
So what I was talking about with the mixed use bylaw allows on-street parking parallel to the curb, angled or perpendicular. Okay. Now, if we take the driveway here as a street, the parking spots for each of the individual units could be interpreted as perpendicular parking on street.
Okay.
That's what I was referring to. That I was looking for a way. Yeah. How can I make this fit the village mixed use bylaw as it stands?
Okay.
And that's an interpretation that mostly seems to work, but it raises a question of a front yard. And if we can say that those fingers that extend out from the building in between the parking, that separate the parking spaces, if we can call those front yards without at the same time making the parking space a front yard, because we don't allow parking in yards in the village mixed use. So I think we can interpret the village mixed use bylaw in a way that makes this work. Alternatively, we would have to find a way to say that we have the ability to waive a provision of this village mixed use bylaw.
Okay,
And
Well, the other waivers,
for all I know, there may be another interpretation that works even better, but that's what I've been able to figure out in this so far.
okay, Prabhu?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Dave.
the
So-
other waivers we're asking for are also from the VMU. So will that be an issue at all?
Which,
The landscape, that's also,
Yes.
So it's the
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 outdoor,
landscape registered landscape architect, and then
the outdoor amenity space.
correct.
yeah, we'd have to take another look at that. There may be some aspects of the VMU that can be waived, some design guidelines and various other things. But it's a good point that we need to make sure that, there are these other items that we need to make sure that the board is able to do what you've requested. Let me put it that way. Right? Again, my issue is that generally speaking, we can't just waive parts of the zoning bylaw, except where we are explicitly authorized by the bylaw to do so.
That's our understanding, always has been. So if there's nothing else, we could have a motion.
Close the hearing. No, not close the hearing. but
Dave knows what my motion is.
Move that the board accept the applicant's written request to be provided to the board to continue this hearing to Monday, September 28th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m.
Second. Take it.
Was there a second in there?
Justin
Prabhu.
seconded, I believe.
Probably.
was I to instruct
We'll give
Oh.
Prabhu the second.
Did your motion include staff to prepare a
Directs,
decision?
yes, I should. The motion includes directing staff to begin drafting a decision.
All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. David,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
aye.
Rebo,
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Oh, Chris, I noticed that I have the participants list, the panelist column has a place where I think I can get a wave hand, but the attendees column, which is where other people are that haven't been let into the panelist category, whatever you do to do that, there doesn't seem to be a wave or a raised hand for that part for future reference. Okay. Okay, I think we be able to
Sorry,
move.
my understanding is that both have the raise hand feature,
Well,
both attendees and panelists.
I don't see it.
It's because we are a panelist, we can't raise hands in the attendees column. But otherwise, it's.
They can raise
all-
their hand.
We can only raise our own hand.
Yeah,
It's whichever column you appear in, you'll see the raise hand.
okay.
So tonight, Norman, that's what brought my attention to Norm Hill. He was able to raise his hand, and then we gave him the permission to speak. So
I can't tell who's raising their hand then. In that it would seem. So anyway, make a note for figuring it out. All right, item E, request for special permit SP 2020-6 and site plan approval at 80 Snow Road, Lot 2, a continuation.
Mr. Chairman, I'm James Tatro from Thompson Liston Associates, speaking on behalf of 163 LLC, who are the applicants for a special permit and site plan approval at that property, Lot 2 at 80 Snow Road. And we've gone over really most of the issues, most of the information that could be discussed at previous meetings. I just wanted to briefly add that excuse me, that at between the last meeting and this meeting, I sent in a letter just in regard to a couple of points, just putting in writing some of the discussion that had been made in regard to the special permit issuance criteria, and also just noting that the density of the proposed development of Lot 2 units on 29,000 and change square feet, is actually pretty close to the middle of the density of this whole neighborhood between East Street and the Mass Pike. And secondly, I just wanted to add, I did add in that letter, that the use regulation schedule actually lists several different uses that are permissible with the issuance of a special permit in the R20 zoning district. And frankly, a duplex use is much closer, much more compatible to single family homes than any of those uses. And the existence of the possibility of them being issued a special permit does not necessarily speak for the issuance of a special permit in this case, but the drafters of the use regulation schedule at least seem to consider other uses which are much less compatible on their face, a boarding house, a nursing home, a greenhouse, and other uses with adjacent single-family homes to be possible recipients of a special permit. They're much less compatible than a simple duplex, which is, as one of the board members noted at the last meeting, we could build this exact same structure with this exact same driveway in this exact same location and have the exact same number of people living there, driving the exact same number of cars, but not have a party wall dividing it down the middle, and that single family home would be permissible by right. And it's hard to see that just that party wall, that dividing wall, is such a change in the nature of the use that it makes it not compatible. That's the applicant's argument in this instance.
If simply being in the R20 zone is always compatible for this use, then there wouldn't be a call out for a special permit to allow it in this.
I have an interesting, I think, came up with some interesting observations here, prompted in part by some of the information in the public comments, the comments from the public that served as sort of a reminder. I maintain my position that a structure of comparable size, or setting aside certain considerations, just generally speaking, a duplex versus a single family home of the same size, it doesn't really make any difference to me. And we went over that at some length the last meeting. I won't repeat that. But the interesting observation here is the discrepancy between what's shown on the site plan and what's shown as an example, an elevation of a similar duplex in terms of the building size, where the elevation drawing shows a size of around 2,700 some square feet total. The footprint of the building on the site plan is 64 feet by 50 feet. Now that raises a concern in my mind, because what that translates to in a two-story building is about 6,400 square feet of living space. That's not counting anything in the basement. It's just, the typical residential area measurement you would make. So 6,400 square feet. Now, if you were to build that as a single family home on this lot, you could, it would be legal. But when you place that size of a home in this neighborhood, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So I seriously doubt that anybody would actually propose building a 6,400 square foot building in this area on this lot, or any lot in the area. So that raises a concern in my mind. That is an issue that I think goes to some compatibility questions. I will note that the 64 by 50 footprint is roughly equal to 4 footprints of the residences on Graney Drive, most of which are in the neighborhood of 24 by 36 or thereabouts, or 24 by 32 for the main part of the house. Some of them also have decks and garages, but if you set that aside, this footprint is about 4 of the homes that are in the neighborhood, just from looking at the footprint perspective. I will also note that on Graney Drive, of all the homes on Graney Drive, the residential area of the home, the living area, averages about 1,800 square feet with a max of 2,400 and a minimum of 1,200. So from the perspective of the size of the structure, the 64 by 50 footprint is way out of line with the area. And that's regardless of how that structure is occupied or divided or not. It's the size of the structure that looks out of place in this area. And so that, I mean, consistent with my point about a single family home, yes, that would be legal, but it would be viewed as incompatible with the neighborhood, and no one would seriously propose putting a 6,400 square foot home on this lot. Now, that kind of comes down to the question, well, what's the real number here? Is it the drawing of a 2,700 square foot building, or is it the footprint of 64 by 50, which would reasonably be interpreted as a 6,400 square foot building?
Is that a question to me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a question. What's the building size that you're actually proposing here?
Well, the building size is what's shown on the site plans. The elevation view was to show the general style and appearance of the proposed house. Wasn't intended to be exactly the home that's built.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. I wanted to confirm that with you.
Yeah, that's true. And also, sorry, James Benincasa. And also that does include the garages. So when you were talking earlier about the neighborhood that you were given the footprint of most homes in the neighborhood and excluding garages. The footprint that you are looking at includes the garage within it.
Is the garage set out to the side?
No, it's all within that footprint.
It's all within the footprint. So
correct.
That doesn't change my point then, because I didn't look at all the Graney Drive homes, but if any of them have a tuck under garage, that would likely have been included within the 32 by 24 typical footprint. So I'm looking at the footprint which defines a square footage of one complete floor, and I'm looking at a 2-floor building, not counting a garage or basement that might be underneath. That's where the 6,400 comes from.
The units they're over 2,000 square feet per unit is the unit size, and then obviously you have the garages.
So the one building on this lot 2 is going to be over 4,000 square feet, not counting the garage space.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's something the board may wish to consider in the context of the compatibility question.
Kind of, I actually had the same sort of thought also. I have no problem with 2-family homes. I want to preface this by saying my mom owned one and lived in one in Baltimore for years. 2-family homes are normal in a lot of the world, and up here too. There are 2-family homes in town. But that's how a neighborhood of primarily post-war infill houses, they're all pretty modest and pretty small. And I just don't see this there. It just needs another single family house like all the rest of them. That's what it's zoned for. And we've faced this issue with zoning before. Milford Road would be my classic one, in that the neighbors weren't happy about the fact that he was putting storage across the street from them, but it was his legal right. And we broke our backs to make sure that it was an attractive site and all that. But it's still, at the end of the day, the zoning said he was light industry, the light off office and light industry, and he met those criteria. This is a single family zoned neighborhood. To me, that's what it is. It's a site that wants a single family home, period.
Okay, I do see a number of comments in Q&A.
If I may briefly, before we get to that,
Yes,
just a quick question for the applicant, just to make me try to wrap my head a little bit around this just slightly better, is that you mentioned the garage is, so these, each unit in this duplex will have a garage, is what I believe I heard you say. You can tell me right now if that's not true, then I can drop the line.
Yes, each unit will have each unit will have a garage.
And including the garage space, are these 2-story or 3-story? If the garage is included in the design
So
of that.
yeah, it's it's basically like a split entry. When you come in, the stairs are up higher. It's kind of split between the first floor, second floor. When you come in, you're gonna go, 4 steps down to the lower level that has the garage, and then 4 steps up to the main level.
And there's not
Kind
a
of like
third
that
level.
split. Yeah, and then there's a split. There's like that. There's the attic. You know what I mean? There is a third floor to it.
So a third living space, a third floor living space, so to speak.
Yeah, it'll be a walk up. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That helps draw the picture better for me.
No
Go ahead, Bob.
that attic or third floor is such that it would be possible to have rooms in there?
Yes.
Okay. So that Dave was just doing 2 times the footprint. Okay. If there isn't anybody else right away, I have a number of comments in the Q&A. I have no idea whether there's any raised hands. Yes.
So there's no raised hands from the attendees, but there extensive comments in the Q&A. I can, if there's either people have posted comments that you'd like me to give permission to speak, or if you'd like me to address certain comments in the Q&A, I'm happy to.
Why don't you address what you can in the, tell us all, I'm not sure that everybody out there can see the Q&A. So just tell us what you're answering and give us what answer you can. And then if there's still stuff that part of it that hasn't been covered, we'll figure out what to do next.
I can certainly do that. I'll also note that Tony Sikora, who has provided many of these comments, also raised his hand. So if you'd prefer that way. Either way.
Okay, well, let's hear from Tony.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. This is Tony Sikora. I am a 25-year resident. I live at 3 Greeny Drive, which is just across the street from 4 Greeny Drive, which is the main abutter to this property. I thank you for taking this. I'll run down through. This has been a thorn in everybody's side here as far as to what is going on with this. Linda, I would like to thank you for your comments. I think it's highly true that the letter that was sent in is very deceiving as far as to the amount of homes and where these homes, these 2 proposed duplexes fit in to the area. If you look at almost half of those homes in that lot area of the presentation that was put forward just recently here. More than, I would say, almost half of those driving through this area are single family, like you said, almost 60s or 70s homes, single family, single garage, single story, modest, very modest homes. You have this development that we live in that has been here for some 25, 30 years, which is a little bit of a step up. They're 2-story split levels that are very well kept up. And then you even can go on the other side of the Mass Pike, and you can see that all the homes there are basically of the same style. To say that these 2 duplexes will fit into I will say the one that's the Dover, I know we can't do anything at, but to take and say that this major one, which has been said to have this massive footprint, will fit in with these homes in this area, especially after having the ground raised as far as it has been from the gully that was there before, and now having this structure put on top of it far exceeds any of the homes in the area. Will stick out like a sore thumb as they come around. The other concerns me as just a concerned resident. I've lived here for over 20 years. I am astounded that there has not been an accident on that corner where the 2 entrances for these lots come out. It is a deadly corner, and I even have to remind myself when coming down the street to slow down even slower than 30 miles an hour, because you don't know what's on the other side of that curve. Between the railroad tracks and these 2 driveways coming out of there, this is going to make this site even worse. The only thing I have left to say on all of these comments that I have on here is the way this was gone about, the way the property was obtained, the sliver of land that was obtained to give this developer his required frontage. You can't do anything with. You couldn't even put a driveway on it if you wanted to. You can't turn the driveway. It is turned into just basically giving frontage. I have property that let's not worry that it starts at an arrowhead and goes to maybe 30 feet to where the driveway comes out. But it's been a heartbreak for this whole community to see that it's gotten this far to where we're almost, standing up united and saying, this is not wanted in the neighborhood. The only other thing is, Robert, you mentioned that, this comes on to the developer's shoulder, that he's starting and doing all of this preparation and everything to this property before any permitting or anything has been done. It's an eyesore for us. It used to be an overgrown property. Now it's basically, we look at it as an eyesore. It's a hazard to the neighborhood, and it's an eyesore. With that, I thank you once again, and hopefully this board can, really see the light of what this neighborhood is asking for. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, Chris, other.
So other comments, Andrew Burton, we would welcome a greenhouse, duly noted. Greg Puchel, has the planning board reviewed all submissions to date, including the most recent sent through later today up to Exhibit 52? If the board wants to comment on that.
I have, just speaking for myself.
Greg Puchel again, the height of the proposed structure needs to be addressed as well. I believe that was discussed. And based on what he just heard, the structure is 3 floors.
35 feet.
Chris, I don't have the plans in front of me. Did we not too long ago put in a new bylaw or rule about the frontage having to extend back to a certain point, you know, have the required frontage with back a certain distance? Maybe Dave remembers.
We did something.
Do you know approximately what section that might have been? Is it the,
I don't remember. It wasn't, if there was a change, it wasn't too long ago.
We made some definitions to frontage, but that is not included there.
I have a 2016 amended and add language to the definition of frontage, lot, corner yard, rear corner lot. Does that sound?
Yeah, that may be what I'm.
Yeah, that's not the one that Bob's thinking of.
Okay.
I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I remember it, at least talking about it, but I don't. I mean, the other obvious place to look is in the intensity of use schedule, and I don't see anything there.
Wonder if it's in. No, wouldn't be in subdivision.
No, it's in subdivision.
I understand that. That's why it wouldn't be there. So funny. On my screen, I'm on the left and you're on the right, but I look to the left to see, and you look to the right to see. So, are we still looking? Yes.
Yeah, I'm doing a search of frontage in the zoning bylaw. I mean, it's primarily in the definition.
Okay. Anyway, that if anybody finds that, let us know. Okay. As far as I can tell, that's all the people that have been asking to be heard. Is there anything more that we need to do with this hearing? If there isn't,
Don't think you know, there anything else that I might have to say we can probably take care of during deliberation on a decision. I think in terms of we had some discussion at the last meeting. We've continued this meeting regarding questions around the compatibility of this use with the area, and I think maybe we've done all the discussing that needs to be. I don't think we need to repeat anything we've said, but do we have everything on record that we think we need to?
Yeah.
Could I ask a procedural question, Chris?
Mhm.
Is it possible to get a site plan approval if the special permit is denied and build based on that site plan approval a single family home of the same size or smaller?
Or could we actually close the hearing on the special permit and extend the hearing for the site plan approval?
Because they were submitted, I mean, it is a one conjoined application, so I'm hesitant to split them that way. But in terms of a single family home, if that's allowed by right, then as long as it doesn't, if it didn't trigger anything, then that would just be.
Right, do we
allowed
even
by
need
right.
it? We don't even need one for a single family.
That's right.
For a single family, you need a building permit, but you do not need any kind of approval from this board.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we've gathered, Dave, we've gathered, the purpose of the hearing is to gather evidence. The purpose then, when we come to decision time, is for us to discuss how we feel about it and come to conclusions, right? So I think we appear to be.
I think we have on record all of the concerns that this board has raised, all the concerns that the abutters and the public have raised. They're all a matter of record. Assuming the record is as complete as we think it needs to be, the next step is to gather up that record, review it, determine what we can and cannot write into a decision and how we want to write the decision, and be done with it.
Well, unless the applicant wants to continue the hearing, I think it's probably time for a motion.
Yeah, on the assumption that there is nothing, no more information to be received, I will move that the board close the public hearing and direct staff to draft a decision.
Second.
I think Justin beat Linda again.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell because I don't have the lag, the internet lag for her. And you people. When I call your name, it's a second and a half before you connect. Okay, if there's no discussion, David.
Aye.
Justin.
Aye.
Close the hearing.
This is the close the hearing and draft. Linda.
Aye.
Prabhu.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Hearing is closed. We can move on.
I'd like to thank all the members of the public for their contributions to this hearing. It's been kind of a long process. Hopefully we have on record everything we need and we've heard everything. And now we can deal with it. Now it's on us, right?
Yep. This is what we get the big bucks for.
We're earning our pay this time.
Oh, at least. I'm sure. Okay. I think we come back now to discussion items. Do we have any discussion to do on any of them, Chris?
I do want to touch briefly. I don't have anything for subdivision rules and regs, but I did want to touch briefly on the mill redevelopment overlay. I did reach out to CMRPC and discussed kind of the remaining items. From their previous scope, they noted that they had kind of estimated those hours. So they're going to provide a new scope for us to consider. We do have 14 LTA hours remaining for this year. So I expect those that if the board move forward with that process, that would likely use up the 14 hours and then some. I think we had about, from the previous scope, we had quite a few hours left in terms of the drafting the language and the any of the mapping and other work that would be done. Some of that I think we may be able to, we certainly have the capabilities, whether or not we have the capacity to do that in-house from the planning department. That might be a bit of a strain on resources, but we definitely have the capabilities to complete some of that work.
So what do you need from us now? Anything?
I think if the board is willing to use those 14 LTA hours, they do need the authorization from the board, similar to last time, to use those hours for that purpose. If we want to wait for the scope to consider that further, we can certainly do so. But
So they're gonna draft a scope.
They're going to
And,
revise the initial scope, correct?
Right. Yeah, so then we should look at that, and then we can authorize additional hours if
Let's do it
we
that
look at the revised scope and figure out to do it.
And do those hours expire this fiscal year or calendar year?
So they essentially renew every year. So what we use, it doesn't roll over. But after this year, we would be reset to 14.
Yeah. My question is more, when does that reset date happen? Is it fiscal or calendar?
I believe it's fiscal.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, no. I think the upper limit is 24, and I should get anytime we have someone participating up there, we're supposed to get an hour, and you can only get 1 hour for even if 2 or 3 of us go. But since I chair 3 bodies for it, get my share of meetings, and if we have any problems, tell them to talk to me as far as that goes. But let's move on. Anything else under this, Chris?
I have a couple of things to toss out to the board regarding the subdivision rules and regs update.
Yes.
One of the bullet items here was low impact development. I mean, I've reviewed that a couple of times, and I've got, I've made some notes about impacts that it might have on the subdivision rules. But I had one question, which I guess really goes to Jeff Walsh. In when he was discussing the subdivision rules with us back in July, he kind of made a passing remark that low impact development has some potential issues with it. And I'd like to get some clarity from Jeff on what those issues are, because at least part of low impact development is all about reducing impervious areas, reducing pavement width and length, reducing the size of dead end turnarounds, that type of thing, and some other things related to eliminating curbs. They recommend eliminating curbs in some cases, allowing roadside swales for drainage instead of typical pipes and so on and so forth. But I'd like to get a better sense from Jeff as to what aspects of low impact development could be problematic and why we should maybe avoid them for now at least. So that's one thing. Another thing, looking through some recommendations from past plans, there was a recommendation from the now 20-year-old master plan that we consider adding a whole new road category called rural roads. And it was intended to facilitate some kind of traffic management. I've never been really able to make a lot of sense out of that. I mean, when I think rural roads, I think roads like the one that certain members of the planning board live on, narrow roads, or very old narrow roads with nothing but stone walls and trees and houses on the sides.
And holes in the middle.
and lots of holes. But when we're looking at subdivision rules, we're looking at rules for building new roads, and under what circumstances would we think that it makes sense to build new rural roads, whatever exactly those might be. So the question for you guys is, can any of you, and you don't have to answer that tonight, but put that on your list of things to think about. Is that something that actually makes any sense at all, particularly within the context of the subdivision rules? I mean, it could easily be a concept that sounded good on the surface, but when you try to figure out what it really means, there's really nothing actionable there. But I'll toss that out as one of the things I've noticed that kind of has me puzzled. And the other thing I'll toss out is something a little bit more substantive, and that is the idea that the subdivision rules and regulations could spell out some rules that are specific to flexible development. The flexible development in the zoning bylaw recommends that the board consider various waivers for a flex. But that's all it says. And we kind of know that we have a bit of a hard time dealing with waivers because the more we waive, the more we're going to be asked to waive. So yeah, we try to minimize waivers. But what I'm thinking is that the subdivision rules could spell out some suitable parameters specifically for flex developments for things like roadway widths, curbing, roadway length, intersection separation. There's various topics that could reasonably be considered under flex within the subdivision rules to meet the goals of flex, which is a generally smaller, more compact development with less roadway length, maybe some roads that might have a slower design speed and facilitate less traffic. So there's quite a number of things that we could potentially think about, basically spelling out in the subdivision rules, here's what you can do in a flex that's different, that's somehow smaller, and that aligns with some of the aspects of low impact development as well. So there's kind of an alignment there. I don't know exactly what in the end I would propose specifically, but I'd like all of us to, to give that some thought, instead of just some generic waivers. And by the way, some of the waivers in the ZBL are for sections of these subdivision rules that no longer exist. One specifically that off the top of my head, I remember is cartway width. Subdivision rules don't address cartways at all anymore. They must have at one time. Some of the second references are wrong too. But sort of look at the list of waivers recommended in the ZBL for flex and think about how we might codify some of those. Instead of making them waivers, just make them some alternatives, sort of, for lack of a better term, I'll call it some standardized waivers. But then once they're in the subdivision rules, they're no longer waivers, and there would still be the option to waive in cases that are appropriate. I'm looking to provide more incentives for flex, to help flex achieve its goals, and to avoid the need for the board to have to struggle with waivers in some cases. So I plan to try to write this up, to write up some more specific ideas myself, but I'd certainly like the rest of us to be thinking about that as well. This could include things like dead end lengths. We could think about rules that for things like loop roads. But that also even touches on the more general, never mind the flex context, but we might decide that flex ought to give us some more wiggle room than the conventional development would. There's a lot of things to think about, a lot of potential moving parts. But that's one of the things that the thought's been developing in my mind as I continue to review possible changes with subdivision rules. That here's someplace where we can make some rules that make flex even more attractive, and help to achieve, like I said, help to achieve the goals of flex.
If I'm not mistaken, we're allowed to waive, I think, pretty much anything in our subdivision rules and regs. There's a section few or something in the law.
Yeah.
Not
Okay.
let's think about it. Chris?
Sorry, I missed that last part. It kind of broke up the audio.
Which last part?
From what you had said to look at.
Whatever. All right. Anything more in this area?
I had a question. So to Dave's point, relooking at the subdivision or reviewing the subdivision laws and so on and so forth. When we look at, for example, the dead end, link to dead end, or to the side distance, are there any? Can we look at any comparables, any comparisons of how do other towns deal with it? Have you already done that? There should be a science behind, based on which it was 500 feet. Like, it was not that some person sat alone and had this nirvana 50 years ago and said 500 feet. something.
We've done some of that. You know,
Okay.
Jeff Walsh mentioned when he was talking with us back in July, he mentioned a few other towns that he works with and what the sort of rules they have. Some not too many years ago, I think our interim town planner, Bill Scanlon, had written up a memo on that back in like January. And I think I remember Joe having come up and looked at a few communities back when he was our planner. May have been before you got on the board, Vikram and Justin and Prabhu. But in any case, we've done some looking at, and I certainly, I would prefer not to reinvent a wheel, but the impression I was left with after what I can remember of what we've already looked at is it's kind of arbitrary. That some towns have decided 500 feet is the right length for a dead end. Some of them have gone 1,000. I think maybe somebody, whether it was Jeff or somebody else, I don't remember, mentioned that there's a town where they set the dead end length not based on feet, but on the number of houses. And then for the most part, when they talk dead ends, they're talking about the simple concept of a cul-de-sac, one road with a turnaround at the end. Our definition of dead end is rather different than that. I don't know if we are unique in that regard, but there is a point to be made about our definition in that it contemplates the overall access to some potentially large number of houses from a single point on a public way. And there's some value in thinking about that. So I would not, I might think of various ways in which that could be altered or mitigated, but I wouldn't want to drop that entirely, that concept, because I think there's value in looking at that a roadway network with only one connection out. And it may be qualitatively different if you have a loop as opposed to a non-loop. And we can think about that or talk about that at some other time. But it wouldn't hurt for us to be more informed about the practices of other towns.
Back in the case of the subdivision that was mentioned earlier tonight, down off of Bruce Street, at that time, and since with actually I think this was High Point, when that was a regular subdivision, I looked and there was a court case that was exactly on point with ours. Another town had a law that was just like or a rule that was just like ours. When I looked into where did the current come from, I think that it was what I've gotten over the years was basically the time that our current rules were written. That was a pretty common or consistent with other towns. It was common sort of practice at that time. So anyway, there you go. But we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I clarify my question, Bob, Dave? So I completely hear that. What I was trying to get to is not just the comparisons piece, but also is there any science behind that? Is there any, lack of better words, is there any transport engineering science behind why it was 500 feet or 600 feet or 300 feet? Or is it left to the town members in various smaller towns or any towns making a decision? So that I was looking for the science behind it, if there is one. If not,
yeah,
I haven't come across a lot of science per se. I think planning boards are elected to make policy, and I think it's fundamentally a policy. We decide what makes good roads for our town.
I think there is some safety issues.
Well, but you never reach closure going down that path. Not safe enough. Oh, it's way more safe than we need.
Well, when they were saying the road was 400 car trip a day, coming out that entrance. That's a lot of cars. coming and going, an entrance, one entrance onto the road.
Well, and everybody knows that from the policy angle, my policy, I want to interchange. Others don't, or others are happier to have little isolated communities. Not sure that that's what Grafton is. We all have different takes on that. Anything more on this? Any bills? No. Right? No bills? Chris?
Sorry.
No. No bills.
No bills.
No bills.
No minutes?
There's one.
There are minutes.
Or are there minutes? Okay. For
August
And
24th.
we have
I
any-
noticed something right up the top for these minutes. The 2A, we don't have a motion or a second listed for that, and my name is not identified as actually voting, but the count is correct. And I do remember who I voted for if it's necessary to say that out loud. And I couldn't even tell you what the actual motion or who seconded, but I do recall the outcome.
I think I do have notes on that.
You did vote for
Yeah, I did vote for
Dave.
David, right? Yes.
Right, so I can include that. There was really no set motion. It's like you had these three candidates and then you just kind of took a roll call vote and everybody picked somebody.
Yeah, there was no actual motion made.
No.
how to handle it. We had an election. No mail-in votes allowed. No early voting either. Okay, are we not, is there anything else on these minutes? If not,
I don't recall seeing anything else. So. I move that we approve the minutes as with the amendments discussed.
Second.
moved in second. Any discussion? Hearing none. David,
Aye.
Dustin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Gribble,
Aye.
I vote aye. Motion carries. Correspondence. Cornell, Stafford.
So I do just want to put another plug briefly for the emergency rental assistance program. The planning department has been pushing forward with getting that. It is set up, and applications are coming in. We are still under our proposed 50 households to be served. So that'll be before the Affordable Housing Trust. I expect they'll probably start to push forward with the lottery, but if there are still interested residents that think they may qualify, please reach out and apply, because there is still room in that program for additional applicants.
Good.
We did also, the planning department has had some preliminary meetings for some larger developments. The plans are still in a preliminary phase. I don't want to go too much in detail, but looking at some additional larger commercial development. So I expect that those meetings will go forward, and working with staff to get them to a level that can be presented to the boards. But just so you know that there is a lot in the pipeline potentially coming. We do also, I just wanted to preface, there is an item that's going to be coming before the board. It's a determination of completeness for High Point Estates. So just procedurally speaking, so it is a 40B, so the board didn't approve it, but town council did weigh in. They were applying to the ZBA for their determination of completeness, and town council actually clarified that they should be coming before the planning board for that determination. So from a procedural standpoint, that was town council's interpretation. Sorry?
Wish we had heard about that in past budget.
Does
Yep.
that determination of completeness include verification of compliance with all the conditions of the comprehensive permit?
I will double check with town council. I believe it would just be determination of completeness in terms of the roadway and its compliance with the subdivision rules and regs. That way, because the determination of completeness is essentially a preliminary matter before road acceptance.
Right, the prerequisite for road acceptance. Just as kind of an aside then, you might want to call the ZBA's attention to the fact that, to my knowledge, they have not yet handed over open space to the town as they were required to do by one of the conditions of the comprehensive permit. I think they're long past the time when they should have done that. I bring that up because of my work on the open space inventory, and I see that there are some open space parcels that they were obligated to hand over to the town that they have not yet done so.
Yeah, I'm definitely in touch with the ZBA and their staff in terms of this application, and we can wait until the hearing for this, but I think there are a number of items that are going to need to be addressed before the board can determine it's complete. But we'll address that at the meeting.
Right. As far as this board is concerned, some of that may not necessarily enter into our process, but the ZBA should be holding their feet to the fire.
Right.
Isn't there a rather serious problem in a certain place in that project? They have the drainage and
Such as court case.
yeah, there's a court case. We need to have the full story about what it is and what our role is.
Yeah, I know Graves has been reviewing that, and I just off the top of my head I don't remember where that landed. So I'll have to double check, but I know Graves has been reviewing it, and I don't remember if it's fully been addressed or where it is in the process. But
the person who's unhappy is still putting stuff up on social media, at least fairly recently. So,
okay,
ZBA is going to know better than us about where that stands. Okay, more staff report.
Those were the main items that I had. So.
I do have a question relating to staff report, if I may, Chris.
Yep.
Where I know we have the interim TA, and Becca it broke in the town news today that she's essentially retiring from her position in Grafton. And do you anticipate there being any impact to the planning office with her departure at this point? Is there anything she's juggling that you think would impact, our board, the league office, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I was leaving that out because I wasn't sure if that had been gone public yet. I think to put it frank, I'd be more comfortable talking with the interim TA at this point to just get a better handle of what those impacts may be, if any. I expect that there may, just as a staff capacity overall. But I need to get more information before I feel comfortable giving a full report on that. So
that's understandable. I just happened to see it today, so I figured I'd mention it.
No, that's been on for 3 hours in there. Know about it. So anything on correspondence? There you go. Okay. Planning board representatives on town committees and Teamwear PC.
I guess. Oh, go ahead. You first. So, just to call it out, the last CPC meeting we had the end of last month, I don't recall if I said that at any other meeting we've had since then, but the two things are approved to go on the fall warrant. One is accessibility improvements in the rec department's overseen parks. So, some, access like paving, and minor things like that are the rec is going to be taking under its umbrella to improve our existing parks for accessibility. The other piece is funding for the Affordable Housing Trust to fund the program they've already started. So basically, it's for the rental assistance. Those are the two items that are being brought to fall town meeting.
Anybody else?
The library building, am I on? Yes. From the library building committee, they are progressing well. They haven't lost any time. There might be a remote chance that we might be able to pull it even forward.
You're going in and out for me, Prabhu. You're
With the others. Are you guys able to hear me, Dustin?
Yep.
Okay. So I was saying from a library building committee update perspective, things are on plan, on target. We should be meeting the date at this point of time. There might be a remote chance that we might be able to pull it forward, but that is too early to give a commitment. That's what was the last update.
Coming long night.
They look like they're sure going to be close to the weather, which was, I think, need to be close to the weather before the weather gets.
Right. They want to finish everything before the weather goes south. They want to start off, then they'll start with the interiors at that point of time. They want to finish all the exterior work, and they're doing well.
They're moving along pretty well there.
Yes.
No bad time. Okay, anybody else? I have one after. Okay. CMRPC had its quarterly meeting last Thursday by Zoom, and it had an interesting program. Unconscious bias, diversity, planning. Start of an important dialogue, and there was sort of a panel set of discussions, and I think it's been recorded and look at it. It's quite interesting. We ought to think about how it is relevant here in our town or our problem, where we stand. But I think it was a good meeting. Had a lot of people there. Had a lot of people being joined in. Okay. Anything else?
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch real briefly the shared spaces grant through the state. So that's for temporary improvements to road infrastructure related to COVID. Well, it's out of COVID, but it's related to any kind of pedestrian or mixed transportation uses. I've been struggling to come up with something in Shrewsbury, and the application, the grant deadline is coming up on September 22nd. I feel like it's money on the table. I'd like to try and get something in if we can. I reached out again today to Recreation and DPW to see if they had any kind of updates, if they had thought about it further. So I'm hoping to potentially hear back from them, but I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. If there's projects that you guys have in mind that, that we can apply for, I really would like to, because there's no indication that they might extend that deadline. So
it helps knowing what kind of projects are eligible. I don't remember whether that one can support projects aimed towards the schools, getting to the school safely, that kind of thing.
yeah, so it can. It does. The challenge, I think, is that it does have to be temporary in nature. So it can't be, for instance, repaving sidewalks. It has to be a temporary adjustment of infrastructure. So thinking of things like planters that protect parking spaces and pedestrians that divide those kinds of avenues. I did have CMRPC put together. They provided me with some information that other communities have gotten awards for, and that explains some more of that eligibility. So I'll circulate that to the board members for you guys to peruse and see if that just jogs any ideas. And hopefully that'll help. But
Okay. Anything else? If not,
Motion to adjourn.
Linda Beecher.
Second.
Are you seconding, Jason? Is that Justin? Whoever. That's not debatable. David,
Aye.
Justin,
Aye.
Linda,
Aye.
Bravo. Bravo? Hello?
He's not on.
I'll take that as an aye. Microphone is not where, whatever.
I decided at that time, yes.
I vote aye. We're adjourned.